This moment left me feeling hollow, voiceless, and grieved. And I think it's worth talking about. For those of you who don't know, I'm a quarter Japanese. My grandfather was born in Hawaii and fought for America on the German front. Met my grandmother in Germany. Came back, had 8 children, gave them all very white American names such as Tony and Sue and Pat. They never spoke Japanese or German in the home because of the immense racism against both of those people groups. And it's a part of my heritage that I still hold dearly onto. I identify as Japanese. But at the same time, I recognize that I've been afforded different advantages because of the color of my skin. I grew up in affluent suburbs in northern Chicago. I had access to great education, never had concerns about walking through a store or driving and getting pulled over by the police. So I recognized that I had this inherent advantage based on my complexion and based on a world being built that favors white people. Even though white people still experience challenges, having privilege doesn't mean that your life's easy. It just means that the color of your skin hasn't added a disproportional challenge to your life and your opportunities.
Hey friends, quick interruption here. This is Joe from A Family Frenzy. I realized I forgot to introduce myself on the video. Me and my wife stream on Twitch. We stream as a family with our 2-year-old daughter and 4-year-old son. In addition to all those things, we like to foster open dialogue across the boundaries of culture, race, ethnicity, faith, politics, and more. So we're happy you're here. If you find the content of this video helpful and want to talk about it more, feel free to interact with us on other platforms such as Twitch, Instagram, and Twitter. And thanks for sticking around. So back to the other Joe.
A couple days ago, I rated a streamer who was doing a cooking show. And when I came into the room, it triggered an alert that left me feeling hollow and empty and exposed and yet powerless to say anything. And I know that wasn't the rater's intent, but I wanted to take time to address the content because, good intentions aside, I think it's important to speak out across these things. And I wanted to capture this moment in a clear video so that you can share this with other friends who may normally laugh at these kinds of things. So when I entered the room, it triggered an alert from the movie A Christmas Story. And it's the scene in which the family's dinner's ruined, so they go out to a Chinese restaurant. And during that scene, a group of 3 Chinese waiters or staff that are singing Christmas carols for the family in the story. And instead of saying fa la 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 la, it's fa ra 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 ra. And they hyper exaggerate their inability to sing well. And you see the family struggling to control their laughter, struggling not to delight in someone's inability to speak well. And the joke is disproportionate at the expense of that people group, in this case, Asians. Now, many of you have seen that scene. And if you haven't, I'll post a link below. And I don't post it in order to perpetuate that moment's okay. I post it so that you can track with this conversation. So go ahead and pause, watch the video, come back. I'll wait. Okay, cool. Some of you may have saw that and it might have triggered this uncomfortable laugh. I want to declare I used to laugh at that scene. That used to be really funny to me when I was growing up, before I began to recognize the inner dynamics of different cultures and what happens when they converge. Me and my wife have done missions work in Japan for almost over half a decade, and we connect with non-native English speakers, Japanese. These individuals are incredibly intelligent, incredibly hardworking, yet there is a stigma with their inability to say the L sound. There is no L sound in the Japanese alphabet. There is a soft RLD sound, like akari, even though people would say akari. In Japan, it's a perfection-driven culture. So to make mistakes brings shame on you culturally. So we will often find that the people that we are trying to serve through English as a second language outreach that my wife leads will not want to speak because they don't want to make mistakes. I have had a proximity to that people group with both young, old people trying to find an ability to speak and to have a sense of worth and a confidence and a delight in what they can say. Because the only way you learn is by practicing. So I want to unpack this idea that Asians are a model minority within America. We have this stigma that Asians are all successful, they're doctors, they're scientists, they're great at math and science. That idea that Asians are a model minority is often used so that moments like that film can occur at their expense. Asians are still a marginalized people group. We don't see this clip as a justice issue. We see it as a cheap laugh. And it's at the expense of a people group that is incredibly important in our culture. People group I identify with. So what happened? So I walk in this room, I'm greeted by this clip that immediately cuts at my heart. Scenes like that perpetuate this stereotype that Asians are stupid and can be laughed at. We have an expectation that they can't say the L sound, so let's hype that up. I work with some of the most intelligent Asian immigrants in the world. And I'll tell you that some of them can be difficult to understand at times. I'm an engineer, I work as a systems engineer in surgical robotics, and we'll have conversations about software and how we need to control our robot a certain way. And I'm working with PhD robotics physicists and all kinds of craziness. I would be a fool to think that individual is not intelligent just because it might be difficult to understand their language. I think it's important to lean into these moments and recognize we can't perpetuate that. But in that moment, when I watched it, I had to grapple with the reality that I'm a minority and that this content makes me feel marginalized. It hurts me as well as others. I felt shamed. I felt voiceless. I basically sat in that stream for 20 minutes and did nothing. And it was so challenging because I recognize I have a power and a privilege as a streamer hosting that raid, coming in to be able to say, hey, that's not cool. But in that moment, because I was hurt and I didn't have an ally in the room who understood that plight, I sat in it and I suffered through it and I left, knowing that my not calling it out would allow another Asian to enter that room and experience the same cut and the same wound. This video is hopefully going to encourage you to think a little bit differently, to understand where can I be an ally, where can I be an advocate in these spaces, where can I have a willingness to take my culture and put it on a shelf for a minute and listen to the plights of marginalized people groups, listen to other people's stories, understand why these things hurt, because nostalgia at the expense of somebody else isn't worth it. It's time to move forward from these things. I'm hopeful that eventually that streamer will get it and take it down, but maybe we could have more of an impact in your sphere of influence, and for you to consider what are the things your family laughs at, what are the things that are normal, and how do you look inward and question, are there things you could do differently to build bridges between other peoples and other cultures? And I am talking to white people. I love white people. I'm one of them. But this moment helped me recognize my dual citizenship as an Asian minority and someone of privilege. So I want to answer a question, well, what do we do with this video? We watch A Christmas Story every year. It's a great movie. Should networks stop playing it because the scene happens in it? Can we overwrite history? The scene's wrong. It's wrong. And I think it's important for networks to realize the power they have and what they share with people. And that if you continue to show that movie as is, uncut, you continue to perpetuate this racial stigma against Asians. And as a network, are you okay with that? As a people, are you okay consuming that? Are you okay with your children seeing that and thinking that's normal and that's funny? Because you're training laughter and racism into your kids. I don't think there's anything wrong with cutting that scene out and showing the movie in its entirety. But what would it look like if you had someone who was a celebrity of Asian descent talk about it after the movie, or insert a cut beforehand, or have something written over the bottom of the scene, acknowledging that this moment, the network doesn't agree with the values of the scene. This movie was filmed in the 80s. But when you show something today without any kind of message before, after, during, or acknowledgement, you're perpetuating that white solidarity, and that silence is continuing to perpetuate inequity and how we view one another. But I think there might be a different path. In the link below, I posted a video of A Christmas Story that was reworked from the Broadway performance on Fox. And I think the way that they've recreated that content is incredible. They have a choir come out at the Chinese restaurant. I think it's called the Philharmonic, and it's all Asians. And what I love is it's both yellow and brown Asians. It covers the plethora of what Asian culture actually is, as opposed to what we think of. They sing with excellence. And after they sing that moment flawlessly in 5-part harmony, the main white character in that story says, wow, I wasn't expecting that. And in that moment, the main host at the restaurant kind of zeroes in on that individual and says, well, what were you expecting? It is so raw and so powerful because it forces us to all look inward and be like, what was I expecting? And not just because I've seen this movie before, but what was I expecting when I was about to hear Asians sing? They then go to establish all these kids are going to these colleges and they're, it humanizes Asians and lifts them up. It plays a little bit towards a model minority as well. But I think it's to just kind of overwrite this idea that Asians are excellent in this culture, and they can be, and we need to see them that way. And we need to remove these stigmas that they can't talk, they can't speak, and they're worth laughing at. So, with that said, I'll leave that video below. I invite you to consider deeply where you can have biases, where you've been socialized to view a culture in a negative light. We need to face ourselves, and we need to figure out what can we change, how can we live differently in these spaces. So I invite you to kind of look inward, to question how you grew up, where you were raised, the words you heard, what you were told was okay, and then start to make deep friendships with people that don't look like you and don't talk like you and have different faith backgrounds than you and different cultural backgrounds than you. These friendships are going to force you to have life on life, and life on life causes friction if you're coming from two different peoples. So it's going to force you to take off your judgment and your idea of what you think is right and walk alongside someone. And if you don't know where to start with that, if you don't know how to make cross-cultural friendships, join the stream. Come hang out with us on Twitch, because we're building a global community. We're building a place where we can have these open, challenging dialogues across the boundaries of race, ethnicity, faith, gender, politics. But we're doing it in a way that's edifying and uplifting and mutually respectful. We've had open discussions on this topic around the idea that, are Asians a model minority, or are they still a marginalized people group? If you want to be a part of that discussion, if you want to have open dialogue, our channel's for you. Cool. Well, I think that's all I got, friends. Editing this video is going to be the hottest mess of my life. I have no idea how I'm going to work through all this. I've just blabbered for 32 minutes to make a 6-minute video about race. Come on. There's no way.